Hi everybody, what's up? My name is Juan. I am just one reader and I'm here with another reading wrap up. Okay, so Booktubeathon starts tomorrow at midnight. What? I am so excited. This year I think might be the year in which I actually complete all the reading challenges. I will have a lot of free time next week, so fingers crossed, people, fingers crossed. So the way that I usually review books in a wrap-up is instead of making a monthly reading wrap-up like many booktubers do, I just take the last 3 or 4 or maybe 5 books that I read and I talk about them. I feel like 3, 4, 5 books is a reasonable amount for me to review without having the videos be like super long. So that's usually how I do it. However, because tomorrow is the beginning of Booktubeathon, I feel like I need to wrap up the 2 books that I have read prior to Booktubeathon, because what happens is every year I make a Booktubeathon wrap up. So this will be a wrap up that I will be posting probably on the last day or one day after Booktubeathon to wrap up all the hopefully 7 books that I read during the Booktubeathon. So there will be 2 books sort of left there that I didn't talk about because I read them before Booktubeathon and I haven't mentioned them in any other wrap-up. So here you go. These are the 2 books that I will be wrapping up today prior to the upcoming Booktubeathon. Got it? That was kind of a very complicated explanation for something that is actually quite very easy to understand. So without any further ado, here we go. The first book that I want to talk about is Giovanni's Room. This is by James Baldwin. It was written in, I think, the 50s, more or less. This is a modern classic. It's one of those books that everyone talks about, like, they are very literary, and it's always mentioned as one of the books that you really have to read, and that kind of a reputation always makes me feel, honestly, quite frankly, very intimidated and very scared, and it makes me feel like I should read a book, but at the same time I feel very self-conscious, and I start feeling I start like really doubting myself, and I start thinking like maybe I'm not smart enough, maybe I just haven't read a lot of very good classic literary fiction, so I might not get it. But I decided I was going to not listen to those voices inside my head anymore, and I picked it up. And boy, Jesus Christ, I was wrong. This was a gem of a novel. Honestly, this is probably the best written book that I've read so far in 2017. I'm not kidding. It's that good. I wouldn't say it's my favorite book of the year, but it's definitely in the top 4 or 5. But it definitely is the best written. James Baldwin is an effing craftsman of the English language. There were just sentences and paragraphs that I wanted to steal and tattoo on myself. It was beautiful, and the text always had some kind of music to it. It had this kind of melancholy cadenza to it. It felt very, very, very evocative, and I love it when an author can make me feel that with the language itself. Now, other than the language, the story itself is enough to make you want to read it. This follows our protagonist, David, who is an American young white man living in, I don't know when this takes place, but it must be like the 30s, 40s, 50s. And we start off in the first chapter. The first chapter is a complete masterpiece on its own because we start with this man, David, in a room in the south of France, and he starts telling you that at the break of dawn, the next day, someone is going to be executed. This someone is someone called Giovanni. After that, the rest of the novel is David telling us his story with this man called Giovanni. It takes place in Paris, which is the perfect setting. It has this kind of Midnight in Paris vibe. It feels kind of like the Paris of Hemingway and Fitzgerald and all these characters. And like I said, James Baldwin's writing really makes everything come alive. It's a very tragic, very sad book, but I really, really recommend it. I gave it 4.75 stars out of 5. And it's just a perfect novel, and it's incredibly short. So go ahead and read Giovanni's Room. The other book that I wanted to talk about is The Seance by John Harwood. This one fell a little bit flat for me. I think it might have also been due to the fact that I read it after reading such a perfect little novel as Giovanni's Room was. But I still feel like this was a perfectly enjoyable book for what it was, but maybe I was sort of still in the mindset for something as good as Giovanni's Room. Does that ever happen to you? It happens to me quite a bit when I read an excellent novel. Always the next novel that I read suffers a little bit from that experience. But anyway, The Seance by John Harwood is a perfectly enjoyable read. It is a Victorian ghost story. It is filled with suspense and intrigue and family drama and family secrets. It's the sort of book that would appeal to people who like Kate Morton, maybe Dodie Smith, also Victorian ghost stories like Shirley Jackson, Frankenstein, Dracula. I don't know, even if you enjoy Edgar Allan Poe, Agatha Christie, Sherlock Holmes. If you enjoy that type of story with a lot of mystery, with some hint of maybe something paranormal, you would enjoy this. Now, the story itself of this book is a little bit hard to discuss and to describe. It's a little bit convoluted, which is partly why I didn't love this book as much. Basically, we have this house, this estate in the middle of these wild British marshes. It's a very derelict ancient house called Raxford Hall, which in my mind, it only sounds right if you say it with a very strong English accent, like Raxford Hall. So Raxford Hall is the house that belongs to this very important aristocratic family, the Raxfords, and the house has been host to a lot of very sinister happenings, disappearances, murders, accidents, deaths, tragedy, the good things in life. And we sort of follow some mysteries that have been happening in Raxford Hall, and then, there's like a central mystery, something that happens, a person disappears, and that sets something in motion, and we meet our protagonists, I think, plural, because there are many different protagonists, at least two, and we follow them as they try to unveil the mysteries of Raxford Hall. Now, even though I think this was a perfectly enjoyable mystery thriller suspense gothic tale, I still found some problems with it. First and foremost, the most obvious problem for me with this book was the title itself. I mean, come on, why was this novel entitled The Seance? I get it. There is a part of the book that involves a seance, but it's very clear to me that the obvious best title possible for this book was Raxford Hall, or maybe something like The Mysteries of Raxford Hall, or something Raxford Hall. That was clean, straight to the point, no bullshitting around. No, that was it, Raxford Hall. Why the seance? I mean, that's not really, I think that's kind of a weird, misleading title. I don't like it. My other big problem with this book was that it could have been much more, it could have been cleaner, it could have been more straightforward, it could have been told in a cleaner, more direct way. I felt like John Harwood, the author, really complicated things for the reader. He uses a lot of this literary device of, the story within a story within a story within a story, and it feels like a matryoshka, which is, I do like books that feel like that, like you're piecing all the pieces of the puzzle, and at the end you're able to see the bigger picture and go like, whoa, I see what you're doing. But in this particular novel, I felt like the plot was very convoluted and overly complicated, and this novel is only 300 pages. It's a very short novel, really, and I felt like I was reading a 600-page book because there was just a lot of characters, each character with its individual plot line, its individual section of the book, and it just felt like overwrought. Like, just do it in a cleaner way, which is something that I really love about books like We Have Always Lived in the Castle by Shirley Jackson. I love how simple but deceivingly simple that story is. And I think this one, although it was really enjoyable, it could have been told in a much more efficient way. However, I do recommend it. I gave it 3 stars. It's a good enough book. So there you go. That was my very brief wrap up for 2 books prior to the booktubeathon. Booktubeathon starts tomorrow. So I will be seeing you on Instagram during the booktubeathon. I will leave my Instagram down below in case you don't have it already. And I will see you there on Instagram during the booktubeathon for like some updates or some thoughts on the books that I'm reading. And then I will see you back here on the channel on BookTube for the post booktubeathon wrap up to see just how well or awful I did. Thanks for watching.